Welcome back to the channel, my fellow pirates and adventurers. We return to a previous video again for another revisation, if that's a word, I don't know, or a revising, I would say, and come back to a familiar face, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, and the eventual beginnings through his 12 sons, Jacob, who would have his name changed to the very nation that is around still to this day, Israel. We will be taking a look at his origins and history to kind of take more of a deep dive on certain points of his history and not just talk about one part. We'll be talking about the birth and up until all the way to when he wrestled with God, and talk about the more significant points in the story and some of the meaning behind it. So let's go ahead and get started and get your Bibles out. And now we're going to go ahead and go to the first point of his history. We're going to take a look at Genesis chapter 25, verses 19 to 34. I'm going to stop at certain points here and there, kind of discuss some important things to kind of have an idea of and where this point in history is at for Jacob. And of course, this is his birth alongside his brother Esau. And verse 19, it says, "These are the generations of Isaac and Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel," if I can say that right, "the Armenian of Padanaram," which I am very bad at pronunciations, I apologize, "the sister of Laban, the Armenian, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived." Now, what's interesting about this is, if you don't know anything about Abraham, Isaac's father, before Isaac was born, Sarah was also barren. She was also I believe she was in her 100s at the time, and she couldn't conceive, and so she had the idea of letting Abraham conceive through her Egyptian slave, Hagar. If you know anything about that, it's very interesting. There's different connections to many different things, especially with Islam, through Ishmael, the son of Hagar and Abraham. But with this instance, this is very interesting. It kind of has another connection here and there through this, and shows the struggle between two brothers. And as we read along, we learn more and more that Jacob always has kind of been thrown to the side, but also ended up supplanting his brother, which his name means literally, before God changed his name, it meant supplanter. And so verse 22, it says, "The children struggled together within her, and she said, 'If this is thus, why is this happening to me?' She went in to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and these 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Important point here. A very important point here before we get to another part of this story that's very interesting, is the constant struggle between the 2 brothers. And in a lot of the prophetic literature of the major prophets, sometimes in the minor prophets, they refer to Esau as other nations. They refer to Esau as the enemy, and they refer to Jacob as Israel, which is very significant in the constant wrestling, and I guess in this case with each other, and the constant fighting with each other, and then is to show the problematicness of what happened between Jacob and Esau, but also visualize it for some of the Israeli people, or the Hebrew people back then, because they needed a good example to give themselves, to really think about what's going on, and to really get them not only thinking, but going back to the scriptures to learn more about those ancestors, to go back and find out for themselves, and to really kind of question their own behavior. And so the next verse is, "When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all of his body like a hairy cloak. So they called him Esau. Now, Esau, being the firstborn, in a lot of different ways, it kind of matters and it kind of doesn't. Nowadays, in the modern day take, it kind of really doesn't matter. But in a Hebrew sense, it mattered because that was the first person to get the inheritance. That was the first person who would inherit anything. That was the person that would take the place of the leader of the household back then. And so Esau, kind of being a man's man as he grew up, and we'll get to that. It's very interesting how they describe how he was born with hair all over his body. That's very interesting. You never usually see something like that. And I forgot what the meaning of Esau is, and I might add it at the bottom of the screen here just to have a definition there. It's very interesting. He was a red-haired, very hairy man. And afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Jacob or Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When his wife bore him, which is a weird wording here. I don't know why. Isaac was 60 at this time when they were born, which is crazy to even think about it. Being a new dad at 60 years old. Think about this. His father before him was a dad at 80 years old, and then a dad at 120. That is unheard of nowadays. And it's changed, and that's also due to a lot of different theological stuff we can talk about. The fall of man through Adam and Eve. And then eventually, of course, the redemption and resurrection through Jesus. That's a whole different thing we can go into. But with this, it's important to understand that Jacob always had some sort of leg up against Esau. Even when they were born, he's grabbing his heel. He's trying to get ahead of him. And it's an interesting dynamic. And so here's another thing too, of favoritism happens between Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac favors Esau due to the fact he hunts and becomes kind of a man's man, and then Jacob, who's a lot more softer and a little bit more, how would you say, not as masculine in the way his father would want him, and so that's why Rebekah likes Jacob more, and that kind of causes some tension as we go along. And when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in his tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Let's go to verse 29. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, and then this is an important story you want to pay attention to. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me have some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore, his name was called Edom. An interesting detail there. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright right now." Sell me your birthright now. Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is my birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Now, mind you, Jacob still did wrong here. Jacob took his own brother's birthright. Jacob took it like that. But here's the thing. Why was Esau so willing to trade in his birthright for some stew? Why? Because in a lot of instances, Esau is kind of the representation of what a very, very self-centered man is. And a lot of the time, a self-centered man tends to think about himself, tends to think about his image, to be manly, and all sorts of different things. And then with Jacob, he commits something that's a little different. He steals something. He takes something from his brother. Neither one of them are innocent at this point in time. And so we'll get to another point where Isaac does it another time, but it's through Rebekah's influence that he ends up taking the blessing meant for Esau. And so as we go along here, I'm going to finish up here and we're going to get to the next point. So he swore to him his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went to his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Man, that's heavy. A little heavy. And now we're going to go to deceiving Isaac for the blessing part of the section of this. And it's an important part because it is taking the father's blessing, taking Isaac's blessing. And we'll get into it as we go along, but there was a reason for it, and as I'm rereading this, it's gonna remind, and we're gonna discuss it, but it's a very interesting thing because it's not only Jacob's not only taking the birthright, now he's taking his father's blessing away from Esau. And it says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, pay attention to that, his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and he said to him, my son. And he answered, here I am. He said, behold, I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, and your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field, and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. So this is like his blessing inheritance he's giving to Esau, because he knows his time is short. He knows it's becoming more and more clear to him that it is, my time on earth is done and I'm ready to go to heaven and to spend time with my Creator. And so wanting to leave something for his son, despite the favoritism. This is what a father usually is supposed to do, and Proverbs talks about that, and it's a very interesting, I forgot what part of it is. Was it Proverbs 7 or 8? I'll have to take a look at that later, but it talks about building an inheritance. So it is wise for a man to have his own inheritance to give to his family or something like that, to his children. And it's that concept being presented here, but in a more spiritual aspect, in a more spiritual sense back then. And so as we go along, now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for the game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And so what's interesting here is like the mom showing favoritism, Rebekah showing favoritism to Jacob, believing that blessing is more, believing Jacob is more deserving than Esau. In a lot of ways, yes and no. You can it's kind of hard to explain, because neither one of them were deserving of the blessing or the birthright, because they were both in the wrong. And what's interesting is Jacob ended up still becoming the very start of Israel, and Esau was the progenitor of many of what Islam would become. He would end up actually marrying one of Ishmael's daughters and end up creating the different line of people all the way up to the Prophet Muhammad, if I'm correct. I'm not too sure about Islamic history, but it's interesting because it's always the Jewish people and the Islamic people always butting heads, and the Bible's very clear on why this happened. It's been years, thousands upon thousands of year long struggle against each other. And even Christians have the same problem with Islamic people as well, and it's been like hundreds and hundreds of years of struggle. But the point being here is his mom, I guess in a way, his mom maybe have saw the potential of what he could be, and she believed he could be something better than what Esau was. Maybe in a way, not necessarily in the most best way possible, especially tricking her husband to give the blessing as we go along, giving the blessing to Jacob rather than Esau. And the way she does it is kind of devious and not right. But I wonder if she saw the potential and maybe believed that God wanted him to have the blessing and the birthright, and not only that, but be the progenitor of the Israeli people alongside his father and his grandfather. And so as we go along, and you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing. His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go bring them to me. So he went and took them, and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands, and on the smooth parts of his neck. So she's trying to trick Isaac by putting goat skin and his clothes onto him. Because remember, he can't really see very well anymore, and so he has to take a grab. He's an old man, he can't really see anything anymore. And so an important detail we have to pay attention to. And she puts the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went to his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat my game, that your soul may be blessed. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? He answered, because of the Lord your God granted me success. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not. Pay attention there. Whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, who felt him, and said, this is the voice of Jacob's. This voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he didn't recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. And so he blessed him. He said, are you really my son Esau? He answered, I am. Then he said, bring me near to me, that I may that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate it, and he brought him the vine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him. And Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of grain and wine. Let the people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. Wow, that's a mouthful. That's a lot going on there. And so I'm gonna kind of skip what happens next a little bit, but basically Esau, the real Esau, comes back, and he ends up getting the reverse. And we're gonna go just kind of skip down to verse 39. It says, then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, Away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke under from your neck. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with his father, and had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Wow. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. She sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. A little bit weird wordage here and there. I apologize. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran. And so this leads us to the dream at Bethel and the covenant with God for Jacob. And that's going to be verse 10 and 22. And this is during the time while he works under Rebekah's brother Laban. And we're at verse 10, and we're going to read on down to 22. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there for the night. Because the sun had set, taking one of the stones of the place, he had put under it his head and lay down in the place to sleep. He had dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set on the earth, and on top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. Excuse me one moment, I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. I had to do something for a moment. We're at chapter 28. And we're talking about Jacob's ladder. And verse 14, offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and into the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you to the land, back to this land. For I will not leave you, until I have done what I have promised you. And so, through this dream, seeing, and people tend to pay attention to this, and they call this part Jacob's Ladder. And there's a Huey Lewis song, I believe it's called Jacob's Ladder. I'm not sure what it's all about, but it's a very interesting title. It has maybe some inspiration from the actual story. I don't know. I'll take a look into that at some point. But what's interesting here is a lot of people theologically like to pay attention to this one because the dream is very vivid. It's a dream of the ladder going towards heaven and going down towards the earth, and angels ascending and descending, and the Lord being on top of it, being the representation of the separation between heaven and earth. And so in this dream, as God, the Lord God Almighty, speaking to Jacob, he tells him, hey, I know you're in a worse spot right now. I know you're living with your uncle. I know your brother is going to try to come kill you, but I'm here. And I'm making you this. Even despite all he did, God still wanted to promise him and bring him to that place of, I'm going to make you and your children, offspring, into a nation and give you back the entire land. Like, give you from the north to the south to the east to the west. All of it will be yours. And so what's interesting is when it comes to vision, a lot of the time people tend to think, oh, I have to make it happen. If I'm given the vision by God, I have to make it happen. What's interesting is a lot of the time when it comes to vision, when we talk about that, for some that are believers and for some that are not, you can stay if you want, up to you. But when it comes from getting vision from God, it does not mean you make it happen. You have to rely on the Lord on everything. It says in the Word, trust in the Lord with all your understanding and lean not on your own understanding. Or trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And the reason why it says that is a lot of the time we will try to go off and do our own thing. Like with Sarah trying to create the promise of God through Hagar, or many other examples. And kind of with Rebecca, I think she had some idea that what Jacob would be and knew Esau would be problematic. But in this, when you're given something by God, it's not just meant to just be taken out and done now. It's for a later time, as Habakkuk talks about. Write it plainly upon the tables. Habakkuk 2-3. Very interesting section, Habakkuk, one of the minor prophets. Not a lot of people tend to read them, but if you're a believer who's been reading the Bible for a long time, who's been wanting to get a little more details on certain things about vision, go take a look at Habakkuk. Habakkuk chapter 2 is great. And so in this, we are getting presented with the idea of not only vision, not only a promise, but God saying, I'm here. I'm going to be here. I will not leave you until I give you what I promised. And what's interesting is it's a little different how God worked back then. This is before Jesus came. This is before anything was set up. But in theology, they call it types and shadows, where it's kind of referencing Jesus in certain aspects. And so throughout the Old Testament, and not just through the prophetic words of the major prophets and the minor prophets, but in this, it's more so talking about what God does for people. He takes somebody and makes them into something else. And as we move forward, behold, I am with you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and keep me in his way that I go, I will give him and will give me the bread to eat and the clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set upon this pillar, shall be God's house. All that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. And this is kind of just talking about a tithing towards the Lord as well. A lot of the time people tend to not like talking about it because money is a very interesting subject. A lot of the time people tend to love money more than they love the Lord sometimes, unfortunately. And it talks about that in Hebrews chapter 13, to not have a love of money. And it's interesting, it comes after the marriage scripture, but there's a reason why we should not love money. And I believe in Luke it talks about that as well. You can't have two or more masters. You'll hate one and love the other. And so with this being said, it's also basically saying, okay, if this is God, if this is going to be my God, he's going to have to not only do and it's not because he's being a genie, if this is a God worth following, he's going to need to give me these things. He's going to need to give me the food, he's going to need to give me the clothing, and bring me back into my father's house in peace, having faith for that. And so we're going to go ahead and go to chapter 29. We're going to and kind of skip around a little bit because we don't have a whole lot of time. And this is before Jacob ends up marrying Leah, and then eventually the one he wanted to marry, Rachel. And so we'll go to verse 1, kind of set up the idea. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of his people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of the well the flocks were watered, and the stone on the well's mouth was large. And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. And Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" They said, "We know him." He said to them, "It is well with him?" They said, "It is well." And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. He said, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks have gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, and then we will water the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, wow, which is an interesting item, which I had no idea about. That's a neat little detail, learning new stuff every day. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And they're very much, Hebrew people are very much into lineages. Like, okay, who's your lineage? Are you the lineage of David? Are you from the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Levi, and all that? They're very into lineages, and there's a reason why we don't really believe in lineages anymore. There's a reason why we believe in Jesus Christ being our Redeemer, and we're being spiritual, spiritual descendants of Abraham. And we're at this section now where we're kind of just talking about being with his brother now. If I have not said that, then just, getting ready to, start a family with the one he wanted. But unfortunately, we'll get tricked into marrying into 2 wives. Let's see. Now, as soon as Jacob saw right there, then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was his father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him into the house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of her younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel's were beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and then seemed to him but a few days because he had loved her. And so eventually we're going to kind of just skip down. We're kind of skip down a little bit. Let's see. Actually, we might not skip this section. We're going to kind of read through this real quick, and we'll skip verses 31 to 35 and kind of go into chapter 30. And this is the part that you have to pay attention to, because this is why a lot of people like to point out, well, polygamy was in the Bible. Why did this happen? Well, because he was tricked into having multiple wives. Also, Abraham wasn't necessarily tricked into it, but was coerced by his wife to try to have a kid through another woman. And so they try to make Abraham, they try to make Isaac, and they try to, well, mostly Abraham and Jacob look like these bad guys, but in reality, no. If you read on, their circumstances were different. One was tricked into, well, one was coerced by his wife to have another baby through another one, and through this part of the section of the story, he was tricked by in the dark of the night, not seeing anything, and, well, had intercourse with Leah. He was tricked into marrying Leah through that act. Back then, they did kind of have marriage ceremonies, but it was kind of quick, and it was between families. But to consummate the wedding, they would have sex that very same night. That would be the honeymoon, and that would consummate the wedding. And so Laban, knowing this, he tricked Jacob. And let's go ahead and see this. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. Jacob said to Laban, What is it that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why is then that you have deceived me? Laban said, It is not so done in our country to give our younger before the firstborn. And so basically he's saying, like, hey, I can't just give you my daughter. In essence, in his head, he didn't trick him. He's just saying, he's going by his country's traditions. And in saying that, complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. So what's interesting is, in this section, it shows sometimes certain family members, you don't really tend to see, you don't really know them, and you don't know where they live at. And back then, they had many different traditions. And with Laban, he was believing he was doing the right thing by letting Leah have, become Jacob's wife. And a lot of certain details they say, like, hey, it was like dark out. Jacob couldn't really see Leah at night, and so had her face covered. A lot of different people have a lot of different details, and I believe in different versions they'll have different details, but basically saying he was tricked into sleeping with Leah, but also still Laban following the country's traditions. And so eventually, like, hey, I can promise you Rachel, but you need to spend a week with Leah, and then you can have Rachel as your wife, but serve me another 7 years. And eventually, he would end up leaving, of course, and that is in. We'll go to chapter 31 actually, and kind of describe what happens between Jacob and Laban. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what our father's he has gained all of his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, they stripped shall be your wages, the striped shall be your wages, and then all the flock bore striped. Thus God had taken away the livestock of your father and given it to me in the breeding season. So it's kind of describing, hey, there's so many different times where your dad cheated me out of wages. And so the Lord intervened in this moment and changed it for us. And so we're kind of skip down a little bit to give a little less. We kind of basically understand, okay, Laban ended up cheating Jacob of certain wages and somehow still earned more money than all of his sons combined, which of course breeds jealousy and breeds all that. And then eventually Laban's like, okay, I'm tired of him. He's been a problem for my family, and thinking in the back of his head, I've tried to give him what I promised, and now he's taking everything from me, thinking he's doing this out of malice. And so then Rachel and later answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded in him by as foreigners? For he sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. That is an interesting point, because remember, despite being married to two different women, he's still one with them. And he has to kind of go off of what they're saying. Somewhat. There's certain rules back then that weren't kind of developed yet until maybe the years of the 400 years of science. But in this instance, this is talking about how they, knowing that, how can I say this? They still wanted to obey the Lord, even though, despite whether there was issues between Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, they still wanted to make sure, hey, you follow what God says. And a lot of the time, and I haven't been married myself, and I'm still learning more concepts about marriage, what it means to be a husband, of course, but also in this instance, we want to be careful and say, okay, for those, the believers that are watching, we have, and especially as the men, we have to make sure we obey God. And when we obey God, and we have a woman of the God that's submitted unto us, and she understands, okay, you're doing what the Lord says, we're going to go along with it. And this is basically what happens, but also they're recognizing the despicable nature of their father. And as we go along, we're going to kind of go along, and we'll go up to verse 36 and says, then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, what is of my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my good deeds. What have you found all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. Then these 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself, for my hand required it. Whether stolen by day or stolen by night, there I was. Day by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years from your 2 daughters, and 6 for your flock, and you have changed your wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac, had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Basically confirming, hey, you did all these horrible things to me, even though I did all these good things to you. But God intervened and worked it out to where I wouldn't be cheated by you. It wasn't because I had malice or anything towards you. It was to the point of when he was talking to Laban, he's letting him know, like, why are you doing this? Why are you coming after me when I've done nothing? And the Lord had to intervene when you weren't right in your mind. And so, interestingly, we get to the point to where eventually Laban just agrees to basically say, all right, you know, I understand. And what was it? Let me go ahead and read down. Let's go to 43 real quick. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called, I don't know how to say this, but it's Yegar Shahadutha, but Jacob called Gilead. Then Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Gilead and Mizphath, for he said, the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of another sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, allow no one is with us. See, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, so this heap and this pillar, which I have set between you and me, this heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. And so in this instance, Laban basically promises, okay, if you don't do this through this covenant that we're making with each other, that I understand now, okay, I understand now God was intervening in this moment. And so I won't come after you because you have not done any harm to me. But you have to make sure you don't commit harm to me, so I won't commit harm to you. In this instance, just, a covenant between family members at this point in time. And so once we get to this section, and we're going to kind of talk about this reference point here in a moment, it's really interesting. We're going to get to this point. We're kind of going to skip on down to chapter 32, verse 22, getting to a very important moment that many different people know about, and it's God wrestling with Jacob on how to deal with the situation between him and Esau. And so in this instance, it's not all before any of this happens, and he's able to leave and depart from Laban and starts getting home towards where Esau is living. He's not sure what to do. He's not sure how to deal with the situation. And it says, verse 22, the same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else he had. And so he's making sure, hey, they don't get harmed, they don't get hurt. This is also Esau's family, so I don't get, I don't have them killed, and I send them forward and send them away so I can figure out what I need to do next. And so verse 24, and Jacob was left alone and wrestled with a man, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And this part is very important, because it is the realization of what God was planning out. And he was wrestling. And he had a physical person that he wrestled with. And a lot of the time when people point this out, they don't... In other, translations it says is the angel of the Lord, but they just call him the man in this one. Just a man. And so what's interesting here is it's basically saying not only he wrestled with God, spiritually he wrestled with God physically in this moment, kind of having this representation of, do I go out and see my brother? Do I reconcile with him? Or does he just end up killing me and my family? What do I end up doing? And he's sitting there wrestling with the fact. And then just until daybreak, like imagine that you're wrestling with this guy and you're just not letting go. And one of my favorite things that Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. He knew what God had in mind for him, and he had faith in it. And not only had faith in it, he took a grasp of it. Something that a lot of Christians need to understand, that faith is not a dispensary. It is an unpersuaded belief. Faith is not quick sometimes. It takes time. It took him over 14 years to get everything that God promised him and what, his family member promised him. But in this case, we're more so talking about God, but in this case, he knew what God promised him. And he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. I'm not letting you go. Even with a dislocated hip. And they also kind of explain a really weird detail here. Why they don't eat the tendon is because of what, Jacob's hip socket, but that's not an important detail. Well, to most anyway. But in this section here, it talks about not just the struggle he had, and as the man explain, or the angel of the Lord will explain, or God being in a manifest form, it will explain. It's different. People believe in many different things about this situation or this point in time. But the reality is this. He had faith in the Lord, faith in the God of his father Abraham and Isaac. And when they talk about fear, they don't talk about being afraid. They talk about a reverential fear, a respecting fear. He had a fear for his father, a respectful fear, and wanted to honor him and honor the God of his grandfather. And wanted to believe in him. And that's why he had that vision, why he had that dream. God wanted to let him know, I am that very God, and I can bring you to this point. And so here, and he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then the man said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God, or in other translations, is wrestled with God and with men, and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask me of my name? And there he blessed him. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, which I don't know if that Peniel. I don't think that's the right way of saying it. Saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel did not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip and on the sinew of his thigh. And so, this is an important moment, and we'll kind of read on what happens next. It's very interesting. And we'll get to this part. We'll get to chapter 33. If you don't know, the writer of Genesis is Moses. He writes out Genesis. He writes out Exodus. He also writes out Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. What they call in Jewish or Judaism, the Pentateuch or the Torah. The 5 scrolls, talking about Genesis, talking about Exodus, talking about all these different things, all the different ancestors and stuff. Something that they wanted the Hebrew people to have for centuries later on, which we still have, which is an amazing thing, or thousands of years on its time. But the very important thing is, there was a reason why they didn't do certain things. There was a reason why they couldn't eat certain things. And this detail here talking about how they couldn't eat this. I'm not sure what the sinew of the thigh is, but they wouldn't eat certain parts that had a tendon there on purpose. And so, because they wanted to show, I guess, reverence and respect for Jacob, and most importantly, reverence and respect for the Lord in such a way. But as we go on down, let's go to verse 17. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built himself a house. Well, hold on. Let's go up a little further. Let's go to 4 then. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. When Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the servants drew near, and they and their children, and bowed. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And at last Joseph and Rachel, by the way, Joseph, important figure, very important figure. And last Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. And Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" Jacob answered, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, "Let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and the nursing flocks and the herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and place at the pace of the children until I come to see my Lord in Seir." And so Esau said, "Let me leave with you some people who are with me," because he said, But he said, "What is the need there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of this place was Succoth. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem I don't know how to say this, I apologize, which is the land of Canaan, and on his way to Pandaram, he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he brought 400 pieces of money, the piece of the land in which he had pitched his tent. There he erected an altar, called it El Elihi El Israel. And so, in this point in time, not only he got everything God promised, but he also got peace with his brother and reconciled with him and was able to have a moment of time where where Esau got to see his nephews, he got to see his sister-in-laws, sing all that, and was able to make this point in time where like families came together. And it's a very interesting imagery here. And to kind of close things out a little bit on this section, and I've basically spoken for an hour, which is absolutely nuts to even think about. And I'm going to try to trim as much as I can, but we might end up having an hour of this. Anyway, you know what? We'll just leave it. And I want to say this. When you read these Old Testament stories, this history that I believe is history, that I truly believe is history, and not whoever watches this, I want you to understand this. There's a reason why people believe in the Bible, because it has not only thousands upon thousands of copies. Like, there's even I forgot the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of all five of the books from the Torah. It's very interesting that this has lasted longer than many Greek poets that people tend to lean on a lot for philosophy, for many different things. And I'm not saying, hey, you can enjoy Greek poetry, you can do all that, you can believe in what you want to believe, but personally, for me, I'm going to believe in something that is foundational, that is real to me. And this story shows me that not only God can bring a person out of the darkest beginnings into a better tomorrow. And this is the Old Testament, mind you. New Testament is very interesting. Not only talking about Jesus and what he did for us through the cross, through his resurrection, but also showing us that through that we become spiritual descendants of Abraham, having the same things as Isaac and Jacob, not only in life, but many different aspects of our lives. And so, and a lot of the time people have a hard time believing that because they go through so many different things. And I'm not gonna throw someone else's experience or horrible things that they ever go through. Like, look, the reason why I talk about these things and the reason why I want to talk about this story is because it's important to me. And it's important to me to understand there is a reason why Jesus came. Even with everything in the Old Testament that happened, that sounds crazy, that sounds violent, God didn't want it this way. God didn't want to do it that way. There was a reason why the flood happened. There's a reason why all these different things happened, because God kept on finding every reason to want to destroy some people. Heck, he even destroyed some of the Israeli people or the Hebrew people because they were worshiping another god. Or they went off to do many different things. They would go have kids with other people from other countries, and when the Lord told them not to. And what's interesting is, this is before all that. This is where Jacob sets the foundations of Israel through his sons. And this is before Benjamin was born. This is before Joseph becomes the second command in Egypt. Something that most people don't pay attention to is this. God was still there. And there was a reason why God made these people, these very prominent people in the Bible, on purpose. he showed that, yes, there was redemption that was needed, and yet still God made the way for these men to create this history so he can not only provide for the people within history, but show that my hand has been everywhere the whole time. And so, and through Jacob's story, that's what God did for him. Like, hey, my hand's been through here. I promised your grandfather Abraham that you'll have descendants as numerous as the stars. And I gave that promise to your father. And now you're going to be a fulfillment of that promise through your children. God took a situation and made it better. And now for us believers, we're at a point in time where we know the reality of certain things. We know the reality is sent through the book of the law, which is also talking about the Torah, but also understanding that we couldn't fulfill it, understanding that we needed someone to fulfill it for us now. And to kind of wrap things up and not go another hour, because I could literally talk about this. This is my thing. This is my part of my life that I enjoy ever so much, and I hope I have intrigued people into reading the Bible for themselves. I encourage you to do so, because you don't base your Bible study off of what I'm reading. Base it off of what you're reading. Because at the end of the day, it needs to be personal for you. And this story is personal for me because I was a person who grew up as a Christian, who didn't really understand it yet, who had a mother and father that did everything they could to teach me about faith, to want to learn about stuff in the Bible, to want it and to desire it and to learn from it. And and I guess I'll get a little bit into this. I grew up not only Christian, but I grew up somebody that didn't understand who God was, didn't have a relationship with God, didn't understand what Jesus did, understood he died on the cross, but never understood the weightiness of what he did. And so had many moments where even when I was 4 to 8 years old, there was moments of time where I had suicidal thoughts. And by the age of 11, I dealt with pornography. And had all these different things happen, just moments of time where... And I don't say this to just be dark. I say this because I relate to Jacob, because he had so many moments in his life where he could have just gave up. Where I could have given up myself. And so eventually, when I was 15 years old, became spirit-filled through a youth camp and began to understand the weight of what Jesus did. But still didn't have a relationship with the Lord yet. Eventually, by the age 18, I would get ready to go to Bible college while I was living in Texas. And I met up with these couple of individuals. I'm not going to name names. Don't need anybody's name going out there. A couple roommates I would eventually get to know and believe that, hey, I was going to do ministry with them and all that. And eventually we would go room in a Bible college. Not going to name the name of the Bible college. And to throw them under the bus, because this was more so the fault of the individuals, including myself, of what happened. And so eventually would go back, go live in a dorm with them, spend a couple weeks, nothing happened. And I would begin to see certain things about them being Christian men, but also still not really having that relationship either. One being a couple years older than I am, and another one being a couple years older than I am, those two roommates. And I begin to see problems, and I'm like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, everybody has problems, including me. And as I began to ignore those problems, I began to just have a bunch of different stuff come back and just double down. I started believing some of the things that they would say to me, that I was unchristlike, that I was like one of the roommates convinced me I was too fat, despite the fact that I was skinnier than them. And I might have misheard them, mind you. Anyway, that's a different detail. But basically, I believed that I was fatter than them. I was eating too much, and eventually, it would just get to a point to where being around them caused me to be depressed, fall into a deeper addiction to pornography, and fall back into a deeper pit of suicidal thoughts, to eventually all culminated into one interaction that I'm not going to give too much detail, but I blew all my emotions all over him. He laughed at it, threw me under the bus in front of my dad, and had all this different stuff happen to where I had to realize, like, okay, I can't stay here. It's not healthy for me, because I'm not doing anything for myself, and I'm not hearing from God because of my situation. And so eventually, after leaving there and staying in Texas for another few months and getting ready to move back here where I'm currently living in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, back in 2020 while COVID was happening, we end up moving back. End up going to a church service called Synergy. Not a church service, but kind of just like this kind of young adult, but also middle-aged group of people where it's called Synergy over at Rhema. The Lord would call me to go to Rhema, and I would go to Rhema for 3 years with a couple of other individuals. A couple of friends of mine, if he's watching this, TJ, I'll at least name him. I won't name the other guy out of respect and for his privacy, but TJ, if you end up watching this, thank you. And you're a major part of my life. Thank you. And glory to be God for all what happens next. And I learned through that Bible school, through Rhema, that there was more to life than using God as a genie. Learning to have a hunger for the Bible, for the Word as they call it. Learning to have a hunger for the Word, and learning how to have your own personal faith, because I didn't have my own personal faith. I ended up relying on my family's faith, and to eventually to realize that not only had my own personal faith, to 2 years later, when I started my third year, many different things started to happen. I was released from suicidal thoughts. And it's like, I can go into much detail, but what I'm getting at, folks, is this. I learned to have a relationship with the Lord, not because of the Bible school, but the things that were being taught, the way that the Lord was with me throughout the whole time. He was with me when I was 4 or 5 years old, when I didn't have a relationship with Him, helping me to get through the suicidal thoughts at the age of 4 to 8 years old, to eventually still be with me, even when I wasn't, even if I were, to be with me, to have His hand over my life in this moment of time, to really help me become the man I am today, and to develop this relationship I have. And not to say that I've already obtained it or have been made perfect, as Paul says. I say this to you, for those of you who are just like really struggling with the idea of why am I not in a better position like some other Christians are? It's because we treat God as a genie sometimes. We treat God as if He owes us something, when in reality He doesn't. He wants to bless us, of course, but the reality is we have to learn to follow Him. Jesus gave us one of the greatest commandments of the Great Commission, of course, to go out in all the world and make disciples of many nations. And I hope to be a part of that Great Commission in some way, even through these YouTube videos, whether people like it or not. I want to have my hand in that, because I want to follow Jesus, because He was the reason I was able to get away from the suicidal thoughts, pornography addiction, and to be able to have a relationship with him. And now I say this to you, this is also for you, my fellow Christians. This is also for you who don't believe in Jesus. I think it's for you as well. And I want to give it to you as well, not only just through this Bible discussion, but to help you understand why this is important to me. And I love Jacob's story because I have a different life than he did, but I understand that we were both from dark points in our lives. But we were, even in our births, that's another story I will get into another time. But God turned me around and made me into something that I didn't believe I could be. And I believe it can be the same for you, whoever's watching this. And I say this, please, if any of you are on the fence about Jesus, I'm telling you, he wants you to give him a try. He wants you to understand he saved you on that cross from everything you've ever dealt with. And he wants to have a relationship with you so not only you can get that victory, but keep it. And learn to have peace even through strife. So, if you want to take that opportunity, do so. Go meet with them. Go find somebody. Heck, matter of fact, Lord, anybody who is watching this, may they not only be blessed by it, but have the opportunity to know you in the moment of time, whether they are Christian and still learning and still kind of halfway on you, or the person that's a sinner that's still needing something for their lives to mean something. Lord, I pray that you not only bring them here, but see that there is redemption for them, there is a better life for them, and not having to feel that hole in their life, that you can fulfill what they need and be able to be their Lord and give them the salvation, Lord. And I pray not only whoever watches this, whether Christian or not, they be blessed by this. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen. I am glad we got to finally get to this video. I've been looking forward to it for a while. I wanted to do a little bit more of a explanation and just kind of do a little bit better than I did before with Jacob. And most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the video. And I also encourage you to make sure to read this story for yourself as a believer. And for those who are non-believers, go read the New Testament. Go read the Gospel of John. It'll tell you everything that you need to know if you're on the fence about Jesus. And help you understand how much he loves you. And let's get into discussing down below in the comments and just see what, talk about certain elements you liked from the video. Talk about what you didn't like from the video. And I'll make sure to read them and take a look at it. And thank you again for joining me today. I will see you in the next video this coming Monday. This is the Captain signing off. I bid you adieu. I'm out. Peace.